Hi, welcome to the second session on the interior of heart, in which we'll be dealing about the internal features of the ventricles, which are the right ventricle and the left ventricle. So first, we'll be seeing the internal features of the right ventricle. The right ventricle receives blood from the right atrium via the atrioventricular orifice, which is guarded by a valve with three cusps, which is the right atrioventricular valve, otherwise known as tricuspid valve. And the right ventricle, it communicates with this major vessel, which is the pulmonary trunk. During systole, the blood in the right ventricle will be pushed out into the pulmonary circulation via the pulmonary trunk. And this orifice is called pulmonary orifice. This is in the external features of heart. This is the sternocostal surface of heart. Sternocostal surface of the heart, in which you can see the right atrium here. This is the right auricle. This one is the right ventricle, about which we are going to talk now. This is the left ventricle in the sternocostal surface. The two ventricles are separated by this groove called the interventricular groove, and this is the apex of the heart, which is formed mainly by the left ventricle. So now our concentration is on this chamber, which is the right ventricle. You can also see that this is the vessel which comes out of the right ventricle, which is the pulmonary trunk, and the pulmonary trunk which divides into the left pulmonary artery, and this one is the right pulmonary artery. So this is the trunk, pulmonary trunk. This is the left pulmonary artery. This one is the right pulmonary artery. This is the interior of the right ventricle, where we have removed this wall. This wall of the right ventricle has been removed, or an incision has been put, and this flap has been reflected in order to visualize the interior. So this is the right ventricle interior. This vessel is the pulmonary trunk. Is the pulmonary trunk. This area is the pulmonary orifice, through which the right ventricle communicates with the pulmonary trunk. And this is the right atrioventricular orifice, which is guarded by the tricuspid valve here, through which blood enters into the right ventricle. The pulmonary orifice is also guarded by a valve. You can see the three cusps of the valve here. This valve is called the pulmonary valve. Now coming on to the interior of the right ventricle in detail, there are two subdivisions in the interior. One is the inflowing part. This is the part of the right ventricle which receives blood from the right atrium. So which is shown in this arrow is the direction of blood which enters into the right ventricle from the right atrium. So this part of the ventricle which receives the blood from the right atrium is known as the inflowing part. And so this happens in diastole. During systole, when the ventricles contract, blood in the right ventricle, it is pushed out through the pulmonary trunk. So this is the direction of blood flow then, through the pulmonary trunk. So this part of the ventricle which pushes the blood out, or along which the blood is pushed out, is called the outflowing part of the right ventricle. Otherwise, the outflowing part is otherwise known as the infundibulum. So there are two parts of the right ventricle. One is called the inflowing part. Another is called the outflowing part, or the infundibulum. Now these two parts, as you can see, this is the first part I talked about, this one. This is the second part, along which blood flows out. These two are separated by a crest or a ridge. It is called the supraventricular crest. This is the crest which separates the inflowing part of the right ventricle from the outflowing part of the right ventricle, otherwise known as infundibuloventricular crest. Now we will see in detail about the features of these, of the features of the inflowing part and about the features of the outflowing part. Inflowing part, as you can see, it is a lower part. It is present in the lower compared to the outflowing part, which is present higher. So inflowing is the lower part, outflowing is the upper part.